Today on Monson Made This, I'm going to show you tofu like you've never seen it before.
Ryan Little.
This recipe is months in the making. It started out with some inspiration from a cookbook I found at the library, and it was able to come to life after I tried a Philly cheesesteak sandwich recently. So I'll talk about all those inspirations here as we're cooking, but what I'm making for you today is this really incredible flatbread wrap. It has a really incredible tofu that's sort of taking the place of a pork belly. It's got a cashew cilantro cream sauce, pickled jicama, spicy cherry peppers. It's just a really incredible wrap. So the first thing we need to do though is make this delicious flatbread. So let's start throwing ingredients together and I'll tell you a little bit more about where this recipe idea came from. Here I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, ½ cup of cornmeal, a ½ cup of almond milk, adding to that a ½ cup of very hot, practically boiling water. And at the very end here, I have some salt and baking powder. Of course, all of these ingredients will be in the recipe, which I will have linked below, and it's on my website, monsonmadethis.com. So I'm just adding the cornmeal here, which, to be honest, is kind of a combination of cornmeal and grits. I made a mistake a long time ago, mixed them together, but either one actually works really well in this recipe. So to the flour, adding the cornmeal, and I'm adding the baking powder and salt, and I'm just going to mix this together. So as I said, this recipe was inspired by something that I found at the library. I picked up the Mission Street Food Cookbook, and there was this flatbread sandwich in there, which I think either had duck or pork belly, and it just looked so amazing, and I was obsessed with it. And I wanted to make something like that, but I couldn't decide what exactly I wanted to use as the meat. So this flatbread actually is very similar to what you would find in that cookbook. I've just veganized it. Sorry if you can hear Tuffy in the background, he has some opinions. So I've mixed together the flours and the salt and baking powder. To that I'm adding the almond milk and hot water mixture. And I'm just going to mix these ingredients together. What we want is a dough that holds together. We don't want it too sticky, although it's going to be on the stickier side. We don't want it too dry, and we want it to be able to come together. The reason I'm making this first is because it needs to hang out for about an hour, which is, well, pretty much the amount of time that's going to take us to prepare the rest of the ingredients. So this can just hang out while we do the rest. So mixing this together. When it gets to a point like this, I'm going to just start to mix it with my hands a little bit. If it seems like it's way too sticky, I'm going to add a little bit more all-purpose flour. If it seems too dry, I'll add a little bit more water. So this seems pretty good. It still is a bit sticky, but I'm going to go ahead and cover this, let it hang out for an hour. If it ends up being too sticky in the end, I can add a little bit more flour to it before I roll it out. But that's it, and we'll get started on the tofu next. The next thing we're going to prepare is the tofu, which is the meat of this dish. And the reason I didn't make this right away when I saw it in the cookbook was because I really wanted to find the perfect meat substitute to go into this. Now, if you watched my last video, sort of what I eat in a day Q&A video, I talked about how I'm not teaching anymore and kind of just doing random odd jobs to make ends meet. Well, one of the things that I do is I work for Jackie Sabon from Vegan Yak Attack, and I'm kind of her assistant, helping her out with things. And one of her jobs, in addition to being an amazing food blogger, is that she is an amazing photographer as well. So she photographed a cookbook for the sexy vegan, Brian, and one of the things she had to make was this Philly cheesesteak sandwich. So I was helping her out with the process, and at the end of the shoot, we got to eat the sandwich. And this tofu Philly cheesesteak just blew my mind. It was made with tofu. It was like the perfect substitute. So you need to go check out the Sexy Vegan, get that little cookbook of his. It's like a 1 or 2 recipe cookbook, and learn how to make this cheesesteak because it is mind-blowing. But today I'm going to use a similar technique that uses the tofu like he used it to make this wrap. And it's just, again, kind of the perfect meat substitute in this. The trick is this high protein or super firm tofu. And we're gonna use this entire package here. And this will make probably 4 to 5 sandwiches depending on how meaty you want it. So let's slice into this. So this block of tofu I purchased at Sprouts. They have these at most grocery stores now. Trader Joe's has their own brand. So what I'm doing is just slicing through the package so that I have 2 kind of rectangular pieces here. There's not much liquid in there, although if you can see there's a little bit coming out. But it doesn't need to be drained, doesn't need to be pressed or anything like that. So the way I'm going to slice this today is so that I'm creating a bunch of little squares. And you could use a mandolin if you wanted. I believe Brian's recipe asks for a mandolin. But I find that if you do it by hand, you get some inconsistent pieces, which is actually really nice. I like that some of the pieces are thinner, some are a little bit thicker, so you get some kind of charred bits, you get some chewier bits. And you just want to slice this all the way. Like I said, we're going to use this entire block. And if you get pieces like that are half cut, no big deal. Like I said, the variety is kind of nice. So I'm just gonna finish slicing up this entire tofu, and then I'm gonna actually meet you at the stove, and I'll show you the magic that turns this tofu into a delicious vegan meat. This is the part of the cooking process that probably takes the longest, and it's just because you probably don't have a huge skillet to cook all of this in one batch. If you do have like a pancake griddle or something, this would be a good time to take that out, but we're gonna work in batches here, and pretty much what we're gonna do is I have the pan here on medium heat, and medium high actually, and what I'm gonna do is just place as much as I can fit in here, and we're going to flip it when it seems like it's brown on one side, and just cook all of this tofu until we get it nice and kind of just like a nice caramelized color on both sides. And this is the kind of the magic that really helps the texture of this tofu. You get it seared on both sides, and it's okay if it crumbles a little bit also. You get it seared on both sides, and then when we cook it in the sauce a little bit later, it just really has a nice chewy, meaty texture. And you see here, I'm actually going to be putting it up on the sides of the pan. I don't really care, just so I can get these browned up. They all seem to cook okay. I'm also using non-stick. I don't know if I said that already. If you're a little bit concerned about your pan, don't think it will be able to be non-stick for this, then by all means use a little bit of oil. But this recipe can pretty much be made oil-free if you wanted it to. I'll show you a swap out when we do the flatbreads later, but these can sear and cook up, and as long as they don't stick, you don't need any oil. So I'm gonna keep my eye on these. When it seems like they're brown, I'm gonna flip them, and then yeah, that's it. You'll kind of know when they're ready to be flipped because they start to color a little bit on the top side. And so I'm just gonna go around, and they seem like they're browning up a little bit, I'll flip them. So some of these pieces are a little bit more done than others. I'm gonna start pulling some out. I'm just gonna put them on a plate. While the second batch sears and cooks up, I'm going to be assembling the sauce that the tofu is going to simmer in and absorb, and it's gonna get it nice and sticky and flavorful. And so to start out with, I have a cup of vegan chicken broth. It's just a cup of water and some better than bouillon, no chicken flavor. I have some Bragg's liquid aminos, some agave, and then kind of the star ingredient here is hoisin sauce. Mix that together, and I'm gonna add just a little bit of red pepper flake, that's optional, and then a few dashes of sesame oil. So just mix this together. As soon as all the tofu is done, we'll put everything back together and it'll simmer in the sauce. Our tofu is done, and I've actually already gone ahead and chopped up half of an onion just into kind of half moon shapes. But I wanted to just break these down slightly, well, I'm gonna cut them in half, just so that the size is a little bit easier to eat and to handle. So I'm just gonna stack these up. You could have done this ahead of time. I find it's better to do it at this point, but just gonna stack them up and cut them in half. As you can see, they're kind of just a rubbery texture, which seems a little bit weird right now, but I promise once it's simmered in the sauce and has time to absorb it, and then we're actually gonna be putting it in the broiler at the very end to crisp things up. You'll see that texture is just perfect, and it's currently my favorite vegan meat. Sometimes you don't feel like seitan or tempeh, and you want something with a little bit of chew and texture, but I don't know. This is also gluten-free, so there's that. All right, looks pretty good. Let's start to cook these in the sauce. So, got my pan back on medium heat. Throw all of my tofu in there. And I've actually been making half recipes of this. This is actually the first time I've made a full batch. So if you wanted to make less, you definitely could. It scales pretty easily. So there's my onion, and then my simmer sauce. Now it seems very liquidy right now, but what's gonna happen is this is going to reduce, the tofu will absorb some, and then it's just gonna kind of caramelize all of the tofu. So this is gonna go, bring it up to a simmer, let it hang out, stir it every once in a while. And I'd say in maybe 5 to 10 minutes, you're gonna have this tofu perfectly done. And then we'll broil it at the end just to give it some crispy edges, but we'll be ready to make the flatbread right after this is done. I actually wanna add a bit of black pepper to this. I forgot to do it earlier. And I ended up turning the stove temperature up too high just to get it to a simmer where things are starting to move. So you might want to do that. Put it up on high until you notice things are cooking pretty well, and then you can adjust the heat as needed if things are getting too reduced or things are just out of your control. Admittedly, this has been going on high the entire time, and as I said, this is the first time I've made a full batch of this, so I'm going to adjust it in the recipe. I don't think you need a full cup of water or broth in here. I would say you'd probably get by with a half to 3/4 of a cup. It's not a problem, it just takes a little bit longer to reduce, but as you can see here, things are absorbed into the tofu. The hoisin and the agave syrup have created sort of a nice caramel sauce. I'm gonna let it go a few more minutes here just until it's fully reduced, but pretty much as soon as that liquid is gone and everything is clinging to the tofu, you can serve it. I'm gonna be throwing it in the broiler right before we serve it on our wraps or our sandwiches. So once this is all absorbed, just gonna let it hang out until we're ready to eat it. Our tofu is done, it's hanging out on the stove. The house smells amazing. Those onions just get caramelized in with the tofu and all that sauce, and it's so amazing. So before we start to roll out our flatbreads though, I wanna go over the toppings a little bit. I kind of made them ahead of time, and so they're really easy to make. The first thing is the sauce, which is a cilantro cashew sauce. This has been on my website for quite a while. I think it's on the Cruncherito, which is like a Taco Bell crunch wrap video or recipe. So I'll link that again in this recipe post, but it's just really simple. It's just cashews, cilantro, a little bit of lime juice, throw it into a blender, and you've got the sauce. This here, because I just wanted them to go a little bit longer, this is Jicama pickles. And what I've done is just using a mandolin, and you can slice these any way that you'd like, but I use kind of the French fry slice. And so I cut these up, and this is, again, also on my website. This same pickling solution I used for the banh mi sandwich, which I think is the very first recipe, definitely the first recipe video. But it's just rice wine, vinegar, water, sugar, salt, and these have been hanging out in here. They need to go at least an hour, so you want to make those in the beginning, but these Jicama pickles are really amazing on top. For some spice and a little bit of sweetness, cherry peppers, I'm just gonna be thinly slicing these up. They'll go on top. And for some garnish and just for some green, I do have some fresh cilantro as well. So all of these are going to be going on top of the flatbread, sandwich, wrap, taco thing when we're ready to assemble it. So yeah, just wanted to let you know about those. So let's roll out the flatbread. This dough has been resting for about an hour, and admittedly I did add a little bit more flour because it was a bit too sticky. So I'm going to divide this up into 8 portions, and if things are still too sticky, I'll just add some more flour before I roll it out. I have 1/8 of the dough here, and I'm going to roll it out. I'm just using Silpat here to help me, just because it's non-stick and it allows me to move the dough around pretty freely. I've been having some sticking problems with this, which I seem to have worked out, but if things are sticking for you, then by all means just add a bit more flour. So the thing that separates this from just a regular tortilla is coconut oil, and we're going to just spread this onto the surface. And you want this to still be a little bit, I don't want to say firm, because you can see I'm having some difficulty spreading it here, but you want this to not be liquidy. You could sub in another kind of oil like olive oil if you wanted, but I feel like the solid oil like this prevents it from soaking into the dough, and it allows it to kind of steam up and create flaky layers, similar to like a laminated dough like you'd get with a croissant or something like that. This is a similar type of construction to a scallion pancake as well, but it makes the best flatbread. So we roll it up and then we put it into a spiral shape like a cinnamon roll, and then we roll it out again. It's okay if you lose some of the layers or things aren't perfectly round. It'll all taste delicious in the end. And we want about a 6-inch circle here. All right, looks pretty good. I'm going to roll out a few more and then I'll meet you at the stove and we will cook these up. I rolled out a few of those flatbreads. Now you could kind of get into a rhythm of making them as you're cooking them, but I just made a few so I can cook them all at one time. While those cook though, I'm going to start the final process for the tofu, which is to broil them. And I've just got my broiler on. I have a non-stick sheet here. You could just put this on a baking sheet, it's up to you. But keep an eye on it because the sugar in this, it's definitely going to go from like starting to sizzle and starting to get a little bit charred to burnt really quickly. So I'm just going to put enough on here for a few wraps. And if you're going to plan on like making this ahead of time, I would do the broiling part at the very end, or basically right before you're going to be eating. So, all right, so there are enough for a couple wraps here, and I'm just going to pop this into my smart oven, which is already set to broil. All right. I also have my cast iron pan warming up here. If you wanted to add a little bit of oil into it if it wasn't well seasoned, but mine's pretty well seasoned, so I'm not going to add any extra oil. Plus, a little bit of oil does sometimes seep out of the wraps or the flatbread, so it keeps things non-stick. So as soon as this is up to temperature, we're ready to roll. My cast iron skillet is literally smoking hot, and I'm just going to put one of my flatbreads in there. Got a few holes, but that'll be okay. And actually my tofu was done, so I turned this off, let it open so it didn't overcook, but just waiting for these flatbreads to be done and then we can assemble. Here we have our finished products. We have a flatbread, we have our tofu that just came out of the broiler. I sliced up those cherry peppers. We have our pickled jicama and the cilantro cream sauce. So let's go ahead and assemble so I can dig in. And as I said, this batch probably makes enough for between 4 and 5, depending on how stuffed you make your flatbreads. Generous serving of tofu. And we're gonna add a few of these pickled jicama fries. Generous drizzle of our cilantro cream sauce. and then top that off with some cherry peppers. If you didn't want to add any heat to this, obviously you could not use the cherry peppers. Also, if you don't really care for cilantro, maybe make an avocado cream sauce or just put some fresh avocado in the wrap. And that's pretty much it. I'm ready to dig in and give it a taste. I just love when dishes like this come together, when I've been working on an idea for a long time and then you get this. The flatbread recipe originally had milk in it. Originally this was pork belly. The sauce was made with mayo, and I've basically made this all vegan, and if you wanted to, you could make it completely oil free. So let me give this a taste. I mean, this flatbread, you could definitely make this with just like a, I don't know, a flatbread like from Trader Joe's, but I think you should go the extra mile and make it. So let's dig in. That tofu, it is truly so meaty and so unctuous, and like you really need this pickled jicama to cut through that meatiness of the tofu. It is so good, so rich. I love the spiciness of those peppers and just the way that that cilantro cream sauce brings it all together. This is truly one of my favorite foods. I made the fried mushroom sandwich, which was based on the Wendy's spicy chicken sandwich, and like if I were to put that in a restaurant, this would be right alongside it. I mean, it is next level. So you need to give this a try. Definitely follow me on Instagram so that you can take pictures of this when you make it and tag me at monsonmadethis. Full recipe is on my website, monsonmadethis.com. You have to give this a try. Give this video a thumbs up if you have not yet already, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I'm close to, I think, 6,000 subscribers right now, so let's keep those subs counting and growing. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week with another recipe video. Thank you to the Sexy Vegan for the idea of how to cook this tofu. Can't wait to finish this. Have a great week. Thank you all for watching.